Testimony, the last bill on our calendar this evening, Representative Handy, 6051.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and I want to praise Judiciary again. And you guys have had a lot of long nights. I've had a few, but I've got a lot of appreciation for. I have always had a lot of appreciation for the challenge that this committee sometimes provides in terms of length and struggling with that along the way. And just a big fan of dogs, including pit bulls, along the way. I think they do get a really bad rap along the way. So I'll just move to my more key piece here. I think if you look at the resolution I have there, it probably, you have the idea of what the intent is there. With decisions like the Citizens United decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, I really am concerned that money is really taking over speech in many ways, in my mind. I know I spoke with Steve from the ACLU. I know he's going to be against it, but we were talking about that discussion, that point about what, well, just again, clarify here, this is would put before the voters a amendment to the Rhode Island Constitution, essentially to assert that money is not free speech. That's the biggest piece about it. There's some other aspects, like, for instance, that corporations do not have constitutional rights. They're not considered people under our law here in Rhode Island. And in response, I know Rep. Agello, you'd forward me an email, and I did get that as well, about the concern about this being in conflict with the U.S. Constitution based on Supreme Court decisions as opposed to actually the language in the Constitution itself. Were this to move forward, I would consider also adding language after the phrase, "the spending of money to influence elections shall not be construed as speech," to add language that also would say, under Article 1, Section 20 of the Rhode Island Constitution. Therefore, it would only be under our Constitution that would be interpreted as such. We aren't trying to say what the U.S. Constitution would say. But to the point I was trying to get at a moment ago about the idea of money and speech, with all due respect to my friend from the ACLU, Steve there, the notion here to me that money is speech along the way, I suppose you can make an argument that it is, but that doesn't mean that it should be treated on the same level as other speech. I think in the end, when we get to a place where billionaires can come into a race, it completely eliminates the speech, essentially, in my opinion, of everybody else in the mix. I mean, there are only so many billionaires on the planet. But even again, when you get to those other points along the way, and so I think it's really vital that it's vital to our democracy, I think, that we respond to this. And that's one of the reasons why I think that this, something like this would send a message. I still think, I'm no attorney, but I think the U.S. Supreme Court has interpreted the Constitution currently incorrectly, and I think, again, future Supreme Courts may hopefully change that. And so as a result, the fact that we have this in our Constitution would not be, in my mind, in conflict with the U.S. Constitution when they come around to my way of thinking at some point in the future. But I do think it sends a message. I also, to the point again that the email that you forwarded to me, Chairwoman Agello, about the calling for Congress to amend the U.S. Constitution to address this problem. We did do a resolution last year, but it wasn't quite as explicit, I think, around the Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, where we can call on Congress to do an amendment. If enough chambers around the United States did that, it would obviously, I think, potentially lead to that. So I would also consider us adding to the end a resolution language that would also do that at the same time. But I still think here in Rhode Island, we can still also express that sentiment that we don't believe money is speech. We don't believe that corporations are people, and we really think that things need to change. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. The email that I forwarded was from William Santagata, who signed up to testify tonight. I don't know if he's here.
I believe he sent it to all the Judiciary Committee members. I'm not
He
positive.
did sign up to testify also, so, but perhaps he got tired. Abel Collins.
Can I see that? Can I see the sheet? Just want to see
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Special thanks to Representative Handy for sticking it out tonight and being here to introduce the bill and introducing the bill, of course, for your consideration. Special thanks also to the members on the committee who have co-signed this groundbreaking legislation. I am here tonight as in my new role as the chair of the new affiliate of the Move to Amend Coalition. The Move to Amend Coalition has been working for the past 4 years to overturn Citizens United and corporate personhood. We've gathered 250,000 signatures around the country to reverse the decision at the national level. We've just really begun that effort here in Rhode Island. Less than a week ago, we started a petition to amend the Rhode Island Constitution in support of this legislation. Already we've gotten 550 signatures from the Rhode Island public on that petition, and I imagine we'll get many more. This is an important issue to people around the country. I am not a lawyer either. I am here really just as a volunteer on top of a lot of other things that I do, but this is such an important issue that I've heard so many people talk to me about, whether it's in my role at Sierra Club or when I ran for office. People are losing faith in our democracy and our democratic institutions because they feel like their voices are being drowned out by all the money in politics. And we need to take steps to get rid of the problem. Our options are limited here on the state level, of course. You did well last year by passing that resolution. A number of other states have passed similar resolutions, but we think more needs to be done. And this is another step that can be taken at the state level. The amendments that Representative Handy mentioned would take any effective enforcement power out of this constitutional amendment, but it would still be a much bolder statement. It would give the people of Rhode Island the chance to make that statement to the Supreme Court, to our leaders in Washington, for themselves. And again, the public has just lost so much faith in our political process. And to give them a question on their ballot that says, are corporations people? And the ability to refute what is widely regarded as a terrible decision would mean a lot to the people of Rhode Island. And I think it's, when you look at the Constitution, there is no mention of corporations. Corporation does not appear once in the Constitution. I think if the framers of the Constitution were here today and they saw the power that corporations today are wielding, they would see the danger of tyranny as they saw from England back in the day. And they would have probably put language in the Constitution similar to what this amendment says. So again, I think it's a good amendment. Of course, we'll leave that up to the people of Rhode Island to decide. But beyond the fact that corporation, the word doesn't appear in the Constitution, I think I want to read this one quote from Supreme Court Justice Stevens, who just left the court recently. Corporations have no consciences, no beliefs, no feelings, no thoughts, no desires. Corporations help structure and facilitate the activities of human beings, to be sure, and their personhood often serves as a useful legal fiction, but they are not themselves members of we the people, by whom and for whom our Constitution was established. And I think that's right. And I think many Supreme Court justices have seen that over the years. It was only 100 years after the Constitution was written that constitutional rights first started being given to corporations. The Supreme Court decided to grant 14th Amendment right protections to corporations, and over the century and some since then, they've started giving them more and more of the other constitutional protections in the Bill of Rights. And I think now is the time to stop that sort of backward slide in giving what are really just legal fictions the same rights as natural persons. When we talk about those rights, those Bill of Rights, we talk about natural persons, or we talk about inalienable rights. And I think you could not look at a corporation and say that it is natural. It's something that's a product of law, and something that people enter into with agreement from the state. You could not say that by taking our rights and imposing them, or transitioning them to corporations, that our rights are any longer inalienable. You have alienated our own rights and given them to another type of, I wouldn't call a being, an organization. So for all these reasons, I think it's critical that we set this out in our own Constitution, become a model for the rest of the country, and be the first. And thank you for your consideration. I hope you will consider passing this legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Christopher Curry, Rhode Island MoveOn.org.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christopher Curry from Pasco, and I've been the Rhode Island MoveOn.org coordinator for the past 2.5 years. During that period of time, I have helped organize, I've organized or helped organize numerous rallies in the greater Providence area, including quite a few on the mall side steps of this building. And of all the issues that we addressed, nothing even comes close to matching Citizens United's ability to inspire rage the moment you mention it with just about everybody I talk to. And it's not because it's so obviously dishonest to claim that corporations are people or that money equals speech. It's because they consider the 5 justices of the Supreme Court who made that ruling to have violated their oath of office by unconstitutionally establishing a framework that lays the groundwork for a takeover of our government by multinational corporations. And if you think about it, that's exactly what it does. And you can see the money flowing and influencing, moving our government to being more and more subordinate to multinational corporations. As we speak right now, there are attempts by multinational corporations to pass these treaties. One's called the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the other's called the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which will enable multinational corporations to sue any government in the United States, all 3 levels, who pass a law for health reasons or safety reasons that interferes with their ability to make profits. And this is a total subjugation of basically our entire governmental structure to multinational corporations. We need to take a stand, and I think this bill will help us take a stand against this trend. And I urge you very much. Well, one more point I'd like to make is if you consider that most of you know that there was an accident in Bangladesh in which over 900 people were killed in a poorly constructed building that collapsed. This is an example of what happens when a government allows itself to be overtaken and run by multinational corporations. We don't want that kind of stuff to happen here, and we've got to take a stand. I urge you to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Gail Taddeo, move to amend.
Thank you, ma'am. My name is Gail Taddeo. I'm with Move to Amend, and I live in Chepachet. I'm a retired heating technician. I spent more than 3 decades in the industry, and I've been volunteering with nonprofit organizations for 35 years. And over the years, I've been involved in many issues, and I've heard people express their opinions on many issues, whether it be housing, healthcare, energy, so on and so forth. In the recent past, the issue that comes to me the most is greed. Greed. People say to me, right now what I do is, I'm semi-retired. I'm retired from the heating industry, but I open a Quickie Mart in the village of Chepachet every morning at 5 o'clock. So I deal with the commuters that come through there. And these are people that read the newspapers, pay attention to the news. This is where greed comes up. And they say to me, speaking of our legislatures and our Congress people, and I don't think you've ever heard it to your face, but they tell me Quote, they've all been bought. That's not a good commentary on a political leadership. My response is, they have not all been bought, because if I thought that they had all been bought, I would not have been volunteering for so many years. There are some people involved in political leadership that are honest and have integrity. And it's an uphill battle against all the money that's being shoveled into politics. I think it's time that this goes on the ballot so that the people of Rhode Island can decide if we should continue to have money in our elections, and if so, should it be regulated? But I think that's a people's decision, so I'd appreciate you folks passing this bill, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Stephen Brown from the ACLU.
Thank you. I am here to express our organization's strong opposition to this legislation. We believe it is clearly unconstitutional and would severely undermine basic First Amendment rights. I think it's important to look at the exact language of this proposed state constitutional amendment. Before doing that, I should clarify that I'm here on behalf of the ACLU of Rhode Island, Inc. We are a corporation, and our rights would be affected and effectively extinguished under this proposed constitutional amendment. If this were to pass, the General Assembly could decide that the ACLU should no longer exist. It could decide that the ACLU should have to pay a registration fee every year that is 10 times higher than any other. It could decide that any entity that wants to be a corporation has to abide by some political principles that it thinks is appropriate. If a school committee wanted to bar a reporter from the Providence Journal or a TV station that had aired critical stories about the school committee, it could ban them because the Providence Journal, the New York Times, the TV station, they're all corporations. I've heard this a lot, this money is not speech. That's a very catchy slogan, but it really simplifies a much more complicated issue. Money is not necessarily speech, but it certainly facilitates a lot of speech and is necessary to facilitate a lot of speech. It doesn't cost anything to stand on a sidewalk and speak or go into a park, but if you want to prepare a flyer and get 50 copies made at Kinko's to express your opposition to this constitutional amendment, it costs money. And to just say money is not speech and therefore it can be regulated is to say that the General Assembly could say, you cannot spend money if it's to be used to prepare a flyer on a political issue. These are some of the realities of the language in this bill. This is not just about Citizens United. I understand it's a controversial decision. It deserves a lot of discussion and debate, but we think that our state constitution would be demeaned and diminished by adding a provision like this into what is a very important document designed to protect all of our rights. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Robert Mallon is signed up as part of a member of Progressive Democrats of America, not speaking but in support of the legislation. Michael McCarthy signed up in support of the legislation. Diane Zentner signed up in support. Thomas Capobianco signed up in support. For those watching on TV at some point in the future, it is now almost 25 of 11 on Thursday evening, May 9th. John Marion, Common Cause.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman and remaining members of the House Judiciary Committee. Common Cause, we didn't sign up in support or opposition because we haven't had a chance, or my board hasn't had a chance to weigh in on the specific language. This was only introduced fairly recently. However, we have taken a position on Citizens United as a national organization and trying to do something about the ruling. Again, actually, our national organization hasn't taken a position on specific language. We supported the resolution, the ceremonial resolution you passed last year, and we promoted those in a number of states, and they've now passed in quite a number of states, including Rhode Island. But in our ongoing effort, we're sort of looking at the landscape of possible constitutional language for the U.S. Constitution that could deal with this, and looking at the different groups, and we appreciate the efforts of Move to Amend and the other groups that have come out with specific language. But as Mr. Brown said, this is very weighty a matter. We disagree with the ACLU's belief that you shouldn't tinker ultimately, because this problem is one created by an interpretation of our Constitution, so it can only be solved by a change to our Constitution. I just want to make one important point, which is often gets left, that people talk about Citizens United, Citizens United, Citizens United, but really this is about a case in 1976, Buckley versus Vallejo, which was the case that ultimately decided that money is the functional equivalent of speech, and therefore, because we can't limit the speech, we can't limit the money. And so I think it's really important to go back and look at that decision and the context of that decision as we're thinking about what we do moving forward. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marion. Stephen Sheehy?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Steve Sheehy, and I am the chair of the Rhode Island chapter of the Sierra Club. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight. The Sierra Club urges consideration of H. 6051 to include language reserving the right of personhood for natural persons. The ability of moneyed interests to influence our government should be regulated to protect citizens' voice in the public sphere. Citizen political speech is already being curtailed in the corporate-owned media, and the drowning of free speech in elections with money by large groups effectively silences alternative viewpoints. Some elected officials seek donors with the most money to give in order to remain competitive with their opponent. More often than not, private citizens do not possess the funds and thus the influence to gain candidates' attention. I liken it to walking into the Providence National Bank building facade on Weybosset Street, only to discover the institution has been hollowed out. Our political and governing systems are being dismantled, and are keeping our sights on where the next infusion of revenue will come from in order to win. Something has to give in this situation. Sierra Club is clear in its opposition to the U.S. Supreme Court's Citizens United decision. By having unchecked amounts of election cycle contributions going to candidates without disclosure, it decreases the dedication of representatives to constituents in favor of money interest. The political power shifts away from voters to money interests, reducing the quality and diversity of political candidates, while decreasing the public trust in the power of voting and public interest lobbying. As part of the Sierra Club Board of Directors statement on the Citizens United ruling, the Rhode Island chapter of the Sierra Club urges the committee to allow debate to reject the Citizens United ruling by revoking personhood from entities not classified as natural persons, for example, voters. This issue deserves bold and decisive action, as our system of government is for we the people, not we the moneyed interests. Rhode Island should get in front of this issue. Our state was founded by independent thinkers who were not afraid to be contrarians to the dominant paradigm of the time. We should make a stand to say, my country is for the people and by the people, and not for sale to the highest bidder. Sierra Club makes the connection between allowing access to government, especially in regards to promoting issues of environmental health, sustainability, and enjoyment, as well as its inherent environmental connection to social justice issues. I urge you to consider Bill H. 6051. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheehy. William Santagata has submitted written testimony in opposition with suggestions of an alternate route. Randall Rose signed up in support. Michael Puyana, Rhode Island Tea Party.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I thought about this for a while, and I realized that while I can fully understand and appreciate the practical concerns of bringing this up because of issues of how virtually unlimited amounts of money can have detrimental effects in many aspects of our society. Money is not the problem. Corporations are not evil entities in and of themselves. Corporations are nothing more than collections of individuals and people who are responsible for their own decisions. TACO Incorporated or CVS or Fidelity are no more capable of doing evil things than is the Rhode Island House Judiciary Committee or the Rhode Island Tea Party. It would be individuals in those groups that would be responsible for doing things and making bad decisions. It's been suggested widely across the country that the Citizens United decision was politically motivated and that certain members of that court were bought off by big money. Well, I can tell you that if I were to hit Powerball for $100 million and have vast amounts of money to spend on political organizations, the fact that I suddenly had lots of money should not preclude me from expressing my political views. I think Councilor Brown nailed it. What if we were to pass something that could allow the Rhode Island General Assembly to say the Rhode Island Tea Party can no longer exist because they're not conservative enough, or they're not in support enough of Second Amendment issues, or 10th Amendment issues, or 13th Amendment issues. These sort of things cannot be allowed through good intentions to step all over the First Amendment. The framers put in the First Amendment for very clear reasons. Citizens United struck a tremendous blow in favor of the First Amendment, and while there are very legitimate and I think reasonable concerns that are raised because of unlimited amounts of money, stepping on the First Amendment is a slippery slope that we cannot walk onto, and that is the reason why, for philosophical reasons, we have to oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Puyana. Nick Katkovich signed up in support of the legislation, not wishing to speak. Jerry Bell Ayer of the Rhode Island Progressive Democrats. Mr. Bell Ayer? We have written testimony from you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to make this very short, even though I'd like to make it very long. I'm sort of surprised at the American Civil Liberties Union and their concern about the ability of the legislature to somehow put them out of business by increasing their annual fees to 10 or 20 or 40%, if that's what I understood. The ACLU is a corporation, and it's an artificial entity. You have the right to do that, whether or not Citizens United was ever passed, or whether or not this piece of legislation is inserted into the Rhode Island Constitution. I'm a corporate attorney. I'm responsible for several corporations, for limited liability companies. I can tell you clearly that a corporation is not a person. We established a corporation for purposes of making business easy for us. It's a very successful way of doing business. It's also a means of limiting our liability. A person